Close your eyes and imagine yourself in the stillness of an ancient world. The Mediterranean lies calm, its waters reflecting soft light from the moon above. The hum of time itself seems to slow. We drift gently into a time before the world knew Byzantium. Before the empire that bore its name, there was Rome, old, vast, and powerful. By the 3rd century CE, however, cracks had begun to form in the marble foundations of this mighty empire. Political instability, border pressures, and economic strains pulled at the edges of what was once unbreakable. Let's linger in this moment. Picture a Roman villa tucked beside the Aegean Sea. Olive trees sway gently in the night breeze. The scent of oil and pressed grape lingers in the warm air. Merchants quietly roll up their wares, and distant temple bells signal the end of another long day in the eastern Roman provinces. At this time, Rome ruled an immense territory stretching from the misty forests of Britain to the golden sands of the Sahara. But ruling such vastness came at a cost. Civil wars, economic instability, and cultural fragmentation pressed against the Roman order. It is here, in this atmosphere of slow unraveling, that the idea of a new Rome is born. The Emperor Diocletian, sensing the growing burden of governance, divides the empire into east and west. What begins as administrative pragmatism soon evolves into something greater. A distinct identity begins to emerge in the east, wealthier, more urban, more Hellenistic in culture. Latin begins to share space with Greek. Pagan temples stand beside rising Christian churches. Now imagine the soft flicker of candlelight reflecting off marble walls in a bishop's study. Manuscripts lie open, ink still drying. A quiet revolution is taking place, not of armies, but of theology, thought, and slow transformation. Christianity, once persecuted, now spreads through the imperial veins. It touches homes, bathhouses, markets, and palaces. As we drift gently through these centuries, we meet a pivotal figure, Constantine the Great. His name echoes like a soft hymn through the annals of time. His conversion to Christianity, whether full of doubt or certainty, marks a profound shift. In 330 CE, Constantine founds a new capital on the ancient site of Byzantium, a Greek city nestled on the Bosporus. He names it Nova Roma, New Rome, but it soon becomes known simply as Constantinople, the city of Constantine. From that moment, history takes a different shape. Byzantium, as we will call it, is not simply Rome relocated. It is Rome reimagined, a fusion of Greek intellect and Roman law, Christian faith and imperial tradition. Over the next 11 centuries, this empire will weather storms no one sees coming, religious schisms, sieges, plagues, and crusades. It will produce luminous mosaics, whispered hymns, golden domes, and fierce debates in candle-lit halls. It will be glorious and tragic. And yet, even in its decline, Byzantium leaves behind not ruins, but echoes. In Orthodox liturgy, in Slavic alphabets, in the domes of Moscow, in the codes of law that still ripple through the modern world. Tonight, you will drift through time. From Constantine to Justinian, from iconoclasts to emperors, from foreign invasion to final fall. Each chapter of this journey will bring you closer to the soul of Byzantium, not just as an empire, but as a living memory of what civilization once dared to be. So breathe deeply. Let the layers of time settle around you like velvet. The world grows quiet. The lanterns are lit along the sea walls of Constantinople. And your journey, the entire story of the Byzantine Empire, begins now. The city of Byzantium begins as a quiet, ancient Greek settlement, its foundation shrouded in myth, said to be laid by Byzas of Megara in the 7th century BCE. Nestled strategically on the Bosporus Strait, It watches both Europe and Asia, as if forever at the crossroads of history. This geography will become its destiny. As we float gently into the 4th century CE, Rome is no longer whole. It's fractured, weary, and pulled by competing emperors and threats from without. It is in this twilight that a singular figure rises, Constantine the Great. Constantine understands the tides of change. His ascent to power is marked by civil war and spiritual transformation. In the year 312, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine claims he sees a vision, a cross in the sky with the words in hoc signo vinces, "In this sign you shall conquer." He adopts the Christian symbol, marches into battle, and emerges victorious. It's a moment that seems to belong not just to politics, but to myth and memory. With this victory, Constantine reshapes the spiritual map of the empire. The next year, he issues the Edict of Milan, granting freedom of worship to Christians. No longer hunted, Christianity flourishes, quietly at first, then boldly. Temples are repurposed into churches. Bishops become imperial advisors. Crosses replace eagles. But Constantine's vision extends beyond religion. He sees the need for a new imperial center, one closer to the wealth of the East, away from the crumbling traditions of old Rome. In 324, he chooses Byzantium as his canvas. For 6 years, architects, artisans, and scholars transform the humble Greek city into a monumental capital. Aqueducts are extended, forums are built, statues from every corner of the empire are brought in. And in 330 CE, with a flourish, Constantine inaugurates Constantinople, the new Rome. Imagine walking its colonnaded streets in the early dawn. Marble buildings gleam with dew, mosaics glint under the rising sun. The city is not yet the splendor it will become, but its bones are strong, its design deliberate. The Hippodrome stands tall, not just a racetrack, but the heart of civic life. The Senate meets in echoing halls, and Christian churches, modest now, begin to multiply. In this moment, we must pause and understand the dual identity of Constantinople. It is Roman, in law, in bureaucracy, in imperial symbolism, but it is also Greek, in language, in philosophy, in art. Latin remains the language of administration, but Greek whispers through the streets and marketplaces. Over time, the Greek tongue will become the soul of the city. Constantine's reign lays the groundwork for this cultural fusion. He does not fully sever ties with paganism, but he privileges Christian imagery. He claims divine favor, but remains pragmatic. In many ways, Constantine stands on a bridge between two worlds, the old empire of Augustus and the future empire of Justinian. As the years drift forward, Constantine's successors continue to shape this new Rome. His sons rule in fragments, and the empire experiences both order and chaos. But the East, anchored by Constantinople, holds firm. Its cities are richer, its trade routes secure, its population more urbanized and resilient. In the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire falls, a slow-motion collapse marked by invasion, economic ruin, and loss of central authority. In 476 CE, Romulus Augustulus, the last Western emperor, is deposed, a symbolic end, though no fanfare marks the moment. And yet, in the East, life continues. The Eastern Empire does not see itself as a new entity. It is the Roman Empire, unbroken. Its emperors speak of Rome, dream of Rome, and legislate in its name. But slowly, imperceptibly, something changes. The art becomes more stylized. Theology becomes more central to governance. The court grows more ceremonial. And most importantly, faith becomes the defining force of the imperial state. By the late 5th century, Constantinople is no longer just a capital. It is a cosmos in miniature. Its walls are thick and triple-layered. Its churches are vast and filled with golden light. Its universities preserve Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian doctrine in delicate balance. The city becomes, in the words of one medieval writer, the eye of all the world. Let us pause now and wander its streets in the evening. The scent of roasting fish drifts from the Golden Horn. Candles glow in the windows of merchant homes. The waters of the Bosporus lap gently against the city's sea walls. Priests chant in candlelit chapels. Monks copy ancient texts by hand, the scratch of quills the only sound in stone cells. Somewhere in the imperial palace, a counselor whispers policy to the emperor. This is Byzantium, in its infancy, watchful, devout, and quietly powerful. By the dawn of the 6th century, a new emperor will take the throne, one whose ambition is matched only by the scale of his vision. Justinian and his brilliant wife Theodora will carry the empire to its golden height. They will build domes that defy gravity. They will codify centuries of law. They will survive plague, rebellion, and fire. But that is for another hour. For now, rest in the glow of Constantinople's early light. The empire has been reborn. The East has claimed the legacy of Rome, and the long story of Byzantium has begun to unfold. Let your breath slow, like the tide beneath the Theodosian walls. Let the quiet voices of history lull you further into stillness. The centuries await. The sun rises over Constantinople in the year 527 CE. The domes and spires of the city catch the morning light, and a new emperor rises to power. His name is Justinian, a man born of humble origins, yet destined to shape the empire like no other since Constantine. Justinian is a man of iron will and sweeping vision. He speaks softly but rules firmly. His goals are as grand as the empire itself: to restore Roman glory, to codify its ancient laws, to fortify the faith, and to transform the very skyline of Constantinople. At his side stands Theodora, his wife and co-ruler, not in title alone, but in power. She is unlike any empress the empire has ever seen. Once an actress, now an intellectual and political force, Theodora is bold, astute, and unshakably loyal to her husband and her people. The partnership between Justinian and Theodora is one of the most remarkable in history. Two minds, equal in ambition, each shaping the Byzantine world in their own way. Let us walk through their world. The city is alive with energy. Merchants from across the Silk Road fill the bazaars with spices, silks, and ivory. Scholars debate theology in shadowed porticos. Soldiers march beneath imperial banners. And above it all, in the center of imperial authority, stands the great palace overlooking the shimmering sea of Marmara. But the early years of Justinian's reign are far from peaceful. In 532 CE, Constantinople is nearly lost to flames and fury during the Nika riots. What begins as a dispute between two chariot-racing factions in the Hippodrome, known as the Blues and the Greens, escalates into a full-scale revolt. For days, the city burns. Palaces, churches, and public buildings are consumed by fire. Justinian is prepared to flee. But Theodora refuses. In a speech remembered across the centuries, she declares, "Royalty is a fine burial shroud." Her defiance steadies the emperor. He calls upon his loyal general Belisarius, who, with precision and brutality, puts down the rebellion. Over 30,000 are killed in a single day within the Hippodrome. When the smoke clears, Justinian rebuilds, not just what was lost, but what had never been dared. At the heart of this rebirth stands the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. Let us pause and enter this sacred space. Imagine stepping beneath its great dome, a miracle of engineering and devotion. The dome seems to float, suspended by light itself, its surface shimmering with golden mosaics. Candles flicker beneath vast arches. Incense curls through the air. The chant of priests reverberates in endless echo. The Hagia Sophia is not merely a church, it is a statement. A monument to divine order, imperial authority, and the transcendence of the Byzantine world. Even today, it stands. But Justinian's vision goes beyond architecture. He launches a sweeping legal project, the Corpus Juris Civilis, or body of civil law. This massive undertaking gathers, clarifies, and codifies centuries of Roman legal thought. It becomes the backbone not only of Byzantine law, but later of European legal tradition. In a world often ruled by custom and decree, Justinian brings order, logic, and clarity. His military ambitions are no less grand. With his brilliant generals, Belisarius and Narses, Justinian reclaims vast territories that had once belonged to Rome. North Africa is wrested from the Vandals. Italy is taken from the Ostrogoths after years of brutal warfare. Parts of southern Spain come under Byzantine control. For a brief, shining moment, it seems that the Roman world might be whole again. But conquest is costly. The wars drain the treasury. Plague ravages the population. The plague of Justinian, which begins in 541 CE, spreads like shadow across the empire. It is one of history's first great pandemics. Bodies fill the streets. Fields lie fallow. Some cities lose half their populations. Even Justinian himself contracts the disease but survives. Imagine the silence after the fever has passed. Streets once filled with life now echo with footsteps of the few who remain. Ships sit idle in harbors. Monasteries offer prayers for the dead. The empire endures, but it does so scarred. And yet, even amidst the losses, the golden light does not dim. Justinian reforms the tax system, strengthens the borders, and promotes religious orthodoxy. He is a devout Christian, but not a passive one. He takes an active role in defining doctrine, punishing heresies, and supporting bishops who align with imperial policy. The relationship between emperor and church becomes ever more intertwined. Here in Byzantium, the emperor is not merely a ruler, he is God's representative on earth. His word shapes both civic and spiritual life. The idea of Caesaropapism, where the emperor wields both secular and religious authority, takes firm root. Let's now return to Theodora. She is not merely Justinian's consort. She is his co-strategist, his advisor, his mirror. She champions women's rights, expands protections for the poor, and defends persecuted minorities. Her influence is seen in laws protecting actresses, expanding divorce rights, and curbing human trafficking. She also plays a crucial role in religious debates, especially the tension between Chalcedonian Christians and Monophysites. The empire, as always, is a tapestry of faith, culture, and conflict. Theodora dies in 548 CE. Justinian rules alone for another 17 years. When he finally passes in 565, he leaves behind a transformed empire. He is both revered and criticized. His wars, though grand, leave lasting fractures. His building projects strain the economy. His religious policies deepen theological divisions. But his impact is undeniable. He gives the Byzantine Empire its golden age, an age of learning, building, codifying, and believing. Let your mind wander now to the tiled halls of the Hagia Sophia, lit by 1,000 lamps. Let your breath match the rhythm of forgotten hymns sung in ancient Greek. Let the echoes of Theodora's voice, brave, measured, unyielding, guide you further into rest. The age of Justinian has passed, and the empire is changing. A colder wind begins to blow from the east, and a new chapter waits quietly in the shadows. The golden age of Justinian has passed into memory, its domes and mosaics casting long shadows into a new and uncertain world. The empire remains grand, but beneath the surface, tensions begin to simmer. The Byzantine Empire is entering its middle period, a time defined not by expansion, but by survival, of borders, of belief, and of identity. We begin in the 7th century, a time when the very map of the world begins to shift. From the Arabian Peninsula, a new spiritual and political force rises with astonishing speed: Islam. The armies of the early caliphate sweep across the Middle East, claiming lands that had been Byzantine for centuries: Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of North Africa. The empire, which had once spanned 3 continents, now shrinks like parchment near a flame. But Byzantium does not fall. Instead, it bends, then hardens. Its character becomes more inward, more spiritual, and more fortified. A new administrative structure arises, the theme system, in which provinces are ruled by military governors called strategoi, responsible not just for governance but for defense. Soldiers are granted land, becoming farmer warriors. It is a system born of necessity, and it keeps the empire alive through wave after wave of invasion. And yet, just as Byzantium fortifies its borders, it begins to tear itself apart from within. Over images. We are now in the 8th century, and a profound spiritual crisis emerges: the iconoclasm, or the icon controversy. At its heart lies a simple yet deeply charged question: should images of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints be venerated or destroyed? For centuries, icons, sacred images painted on wood or mosaicked in gold, had served as windows into the divine. They were not worshipped, but venerated, seen as conduits of grace. In homes, in churches, even on city gates, icons were omnipresent. But now, emperors begin to fear idolatry. In 726 CE, Emperor Leo III issues an edict banning the veneration of icons. Images are torn down from church walls, mosaics are scraped clean, priests and monks who resist are persecuted. Families hide icons under floorboards or behind curtains. The empire is split in two, not just physically, but theologically. The conflict is not merely spiritual, it is also political. The imperial court, eager to centralize power, sees icon veneration as a challenge to authority, especially from the monastic communities who defend icons as essential to worship. The iconoclast emperors see themselves as reformers. Their opponents see them as heretics. The struggle will last over a century. Through emperors and councils, through edicts and uprisings, the empire is consumed by debate over image and meaning. Some churches become barren, their frescoes erased. Others become secret sanctuaries of hidden devotion. The tension shapes not just theology, but art, architecture, and imperial policy. But eventually, the tide turns. In 843 CE, under the regency of Empress Theodora, different Theodora from Justinian's time, icons are restored. This event, known as the Triumph of Orthodoxy, is celebrated annually in the Eastern Church to this day. Icon veneration becomes not just permitted, but central to Byzantine faith. And so, from fire and fracture, a new unity is born. Not a fragile unity, but a deeply rooted spiritual resilience. Let us now wander through a small monastery tucked in the hills of Cappadocia. The cave walls are painted with saints whose eyes seem to follow you in silence. The air smells of beeswax and stone. A single candle flickers before an icon of Christ Pantocrator, stern, merciful, eternal. A monk chants slowly in Greek, his voice soft, steady, rising with each verse of a psalm. This is Byzantium not of emperors, but of souls. Meanwhile, the empire's military fortunes rise and fall. In the east, Arab armies continue their campaigns. In the west, new powers emerge, the Franks under Charlemagne and the papacy, now increasingly independent from imperial control. In 800 CE, the Pope crowns Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans. To Byzantium, this is a direct affront. There can be only one Roman emperor, and he reigns in Constantinople. This moment marks a deepening rift between East and West, not just political, but cultural and religious. Latin and Greek, Pope and Patriarch, logic and mysticism. What once was a single empire is now two competing heirs to Rome. Yet the Byzantine Empire endures and adapts. New emperors rise, some wise, others cruel, some forgotten, and others legendary. The empire weathers invasions by Bulgars, Slavs, and Rus. It converts enemies into allies. It spreads its culture not by sword, but by faith. One of the most remarkable of these conversions comes in the late 9th century, when the Slavic peoples begin to embrace Byzantine Christianity. Missionaries like Saint Cyril and Methodius create the Glagolitic script, a precursor to Cyrillic, allowing the Bible and liturgy to be translated into Slavic tongues. This moment births a spiritual legacy that still echoes in Eastern Europe and Russia. Let us pause, then, on the banks of the Dnieper River. A prince of the Kievan Rus, Vladimir the Great, seeks a new faith for his people. He sends envoys to study the religions of the world. When they return from Constantinople, they speak of the Hagia Sophia and say, "We knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth." Vladimir converts. So do his people. The light of Byzantium has reached new lands. At home, the empire reasserts itself. In the 10th and early 11th centuries, Byzantium enters a new period of cultural and military resurgence. Under emperors like Nikephoros II Phocas, John I Tzimiskes, and Basil II, called the Bulgar Slayer, the empire reconquers territory and strengthens its internal systems. Its armies are professionalized, its finances stabilized, its cities beautified. Imagine walking through Constantinople at this time. The markets overflow with goods. Damask silks from China, perfumes from Arabia, amber from the Baltic. Scholars debate Aristotle in the palace libraries. Mosaics gleam like sunlight trapped in glass. Churches ring with the sound of chanting, bells, and incense. The Byzantine Empire is not only alive, it is the most sophisticated state in Europe. But every golden thread carries the seed of unraveling. For even now, in quiet shadows, new threats stir. In the east, the Seljuk Turks rise. In the west, the schism between Rome and Constantinople deepens. And within the empire, wealth and land grow increasingly concentrated in the hands of aristocrats. Still, for now, we rest in the serenity of this Middle Empire, hardened by struggle, softened by faith, and held together by a sense of divine order. Let the scent of candle smoke and the hush of cloistered prayers ease you deeper into sleep. Let your thoughts drift with the quiet ripples of the Bosporus, carrying memories of icons and emperors. The next age will bring swords and betrayal. But tonight, all is still. As we enter the 11th century, the Byzantine Empire stands tall, respected, wealthy, cultured, but beneath its marble facades, cracks begin to appear. The days of Basil II, the Bulgar Slayer, are over. And in the corridors of the great palace, intrigue takes the place of discipline. We begin this chapter with the death of Basil II in 1025 CE, a moment that marks the end of strong centralized rule. In the decades that follow, a succession of emperors, many from the aristocracy, others placed by palace scheming, preside over a court grown complacent. The once disciplined military themes begin to break down. Landed nobles expand their estates, undermining the free peasantry that had long formed the core of the army. The treasury, once robust, begins to bleed silver, and in the east, the wind begins to howl. A new power, the Seljuk Turks, rides westward from the Central Asian steppes. They are fierce, fast, and devout Muslims. By 1071, they meet the Byzantine army at the Battle of Manzikert, deep in Anatolia. What follows is a catastrophe. The emperor, Romanos IV Diogenes, is captured. The Byzantine army collapses. The defeat at Manzikert is more than military. It opens the floodgates. Over the following decades, most of Anatolia, Byzantium's heartland, is lost to the Seljuks. Cities fall. Villages are abandoned. The empire, once shielded by Asia Minor, is now exposed and vulnerable. And so, Byzantium turns westward, for help. This plea sets in motion one of the most complex and fateful episodes in Byzantine history, the Crusades. In 1195, Emperor Alexios I Komnenos sends envoys to the Pope asking for military aid to fight the Seljuks, but what he receives is far more than he imagined. Pope Urban II, seizing the moment to strengthen papal authority, calls for a holy war to retake Jerusalem. The result is the First Crusade, a tidal wave of knights, lords, and peasants from across Europe. They pass through Constantinople in waves, some orderly, others not. Tensions simmer. Western crusaders speak Latin and see the Byzantines as effete, over-civilized. The Byzantines speak Greek and see the crusaders as crude and dangerous. Still, Alexios skillfully directs the crusaders eastward, and they retake lands from the Turks, including Nicaea and Antioch. But when the crusaders capture Jerusalem in 1099, they do not return the territory to Byzantium. They create their own crusader states, Latin kingdoms, on former Byzantine land. A delicate relationship becomes strained and eventually toxic. Over the next century, successive crusades pass through Byzantine lands. Some plunder towns, others disregard imperial commands. The Byzantine emperors, cautious and pragmatic, try to balance diplomacy with defense, but misunderstandings multiply. By the early 13th century, Byzantium is caught in a fatal spiral. The Komnenian dynasty has revived some strength, but after the death of Manuel the Komnenos, the empire descends once more into faction and rivalry. And then comes the Fourth Crusade. Its original goal was Egypt, but diverted by Venetian politics and Byzantine succession disputes, the Crusaders sail instead to Constantinople. In 1204, after a series of betrayals and broken promises, the unthinkable happens. The Crusaders sack the city. It is a moment of profound trauma, perhaps the darkest in Byzantine history. Latin knights, driven by greed and vengeance, rampage through the Queen of Cities. They loot churches, melt sacred icons, and desecrate the Hagia Sophia itself. Nuns are assaulted, manuscripts burned, relics stolen. The city that had withstood Huns, Persians, Arabs, and Bulgars now falls to fellow Christians. The empire is carved into pieces. Western crusaders establish the Latin Empire of Constantinople, ruling from the stolen throne. Meanwhile, fragments of the old Byzantine state survive in exile, Nicaea, Trebizond, and Epirus. But Byzantium does not die. It waits, and it remembers. In 1261, after 57 years in exile, forces from the Empire of Nicaea, under Michael VIII Palaiologos, retake Constantinople. The city is in ruins. Its palaces are stripped bare, but the crown is restored. A phoenix, though burned, rises again. The Palaiologan dynasty now rules what remains of the Byzantine world. It is an age of both restoration and slow, inevitable decay. Culturally, a renaissance blossoms. Monks, scholars, and poets preserve ancient texts. Icons regain their former radiance. Philosophers revive Platonic thought, laying intellectual foundations that will one day fuel the Italian Renaissance. Picture a scholar in a dim study, surrounded by dusty scrolls. By lamplight, he copies the works of Homer, Plato, and Aristotle. Outside, Constantinople is quieter now, its skyline dimmed, but its mind remains bright. Yet the empire is now a shadow of its former self. Anatolia is lost. The Balkans are fracturing. And in the east, a storm gathers. A new power rises, the Ottoman Turks, led by ambitious sultans and guided by the legacy of conquest. Slowly, methodically, they surround Byzantium, conquering Thrace, the Aegean, and pressing ever closer to Constantinople's walls. Still, the Byzantines resist. They send envoys. They seek alliances. Even the emperors journey west, pleading with the Pope and Catholic princes. They offer church union, Orthodox and Catholic, for military aid. But aid is slow. The West is divided, and few are willing to shed blood for a faded empire. And so, we come to the final act. The last emperor, Constantine the 11th Palaiologos, rules a city surrounded. Constantinople, once home to 1,000,000 souls, now holds perhaps 50,000. The mighty Theodosian walls still stand, but behind them, supplies are low and morale is thinner than the mortar. In 1453, Mehmed II, a young Ottoman sultan, begins the siege. His army is vast, by some counts over 80,000 men. The Byzantines, joined by a few hundred Genoese allies, number fewer than 7,000. For 7 weeks, the city holds. The bells toll, the walls shake, and still the defenders fight, on land and sea, on towers and in tunnels. On May 29th, before dawn, the final assault begins. Ottoman cannons thunder, the final breaches are made, and by sunrise, Constantinople falls. Legend says that Constantine the 11th removes his imperial regalia and charges into battle, never to be seen again. Others say he is struck down near the gate of St. Romanus, his body lost in the chaos. In time, he becomes a symbol, a marble emperor, asleep beneath the city, waiting to return. The fall of Constantinople marks the end of the Byzantine Empire after more than 1,000 years of unbroken history. Yet Byzantium does not vanish. Its scholars flee west, carrying books, ideas, and visions of a world more ancient than Rome. Its liturgy lives on, in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Its spirit echoes through domes and chants, through mosaics and manuscripts. Let us now float through the final dusk of the empire. Picture a city on fire, its skyline lit in amber and ash. But also imagine a candle passed from hand to hand, lighting new flames far beyond the walls. In Venice, Florence, Moscow, the light does not die. It transforms, it travels, and it remembers. As we drift from this chapter, let us give reverence to what was lost and what still endures. The cross and the crescent now share the skyline of Constantinople, but in its stones, its streets, and its stories, Byzantium lives on. The city has fallen, the emperor is gone, and the purple robes lie trampled in the dust. Yet Byzantium is not extinguished. It is whispered in churches, sung in choirs, painted in gold. Its legacy, like a river, flows outward, quietly shaping the world that follows. Let us begin in the East, where orthodoxy still holds firm. In the centuries leading up to the fall of Constantinople, Byzantium had already begun exporting more than silk and spices. It had carried its faith, liturgy, and political models into Slavic lands. Missionaries like Cyril and Methodius in the 9th century traveled to Moravia and the Balkans, bringing Christianity in the Byzantine rite. They developed the Glagolitic script, ancestor of the Cyrillic alphabet, allowing Slavic peoples to read and write in their own tongues, and thus to translate Holy Scripture into a living language. This was not conquest, it was cultural grafting, deep and enduring. Among these lands, Kievan Rus', the medieval precursor to modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, emerges as a key student of Byzantium. In 988 CE, Prince Vladimir of Kiev converts to Eastern Christianity. He marries a Byzantine princess, Anna, and brings the Orthodox faith to his people. And so, long before 1453, Byzantium had already planted seeds in the Slavic world. After the fall, these seeds grow. In particular, Moscow rises as the new guardian of orthodoxy. Russian rulers begin to see themselves not simply as princes, but as heirs to a sacred legacy. The idea of Moscow as the Third Rome begins to circulate. The first Rome had fallen to heresy. The second, Constantinople, had fallen to the Turks. The third, they claimed, would endure until the end of time. In 1472, Ivan III of Russia marries Sophia Palaiologina, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor. It is a symbolic union, uniting the Russian state with the last embers of the Roman imperial line. The Russian czars adopt the double-headed eagle, Byzantium's old symbol, and increasingly present themselves as autocratic rulers ordained by God in the model of the Byzantine basileus. But even in the Islamic world, Byzantium leaves its mark. Mehmed II, the Ottoman conqueror of Constantinople, does not raze the city in full. Instead, he seeks to restore and repopulate it. He proclaims himself Kaiser-i Rum, Caesar of Rome. He appoints a new Orthodox patriarch and preserves the ecclesiastical hierarchy. Hagia Sophia is transformed into a mosque, but its domes remain, and its structure inspires generations of Ottoman architects. The empire that follows, the Ottoman Empire, will in many ways echo Byzantium. It governs a multi-ethnic empire, employs a central bureaucracy, and maintains complex provincial structures. Even culturally, it inherits Constantinople's cosmopolitan spirit. Now drift westward, across the Adriatic, into Italy. Here, in cities like Florence, Venice, and Rome, the intellectual legacy of Byzantium blooms anew. After 1453, a wave of Greek scholars flee westward, carrying with them ancient manuscripts, works of Plato, Aristotle, Galen, and Euclid, long forgotten or ignored in Latin Europe. These scholars bring not only texts, but methods of scholarship, philology, textual criticism, philosophy grounded in Greek original sources. Their arrival fuels the Italian Renaissance, an intellectual and artistic rebirth that transforms Europe. Imagine a scriptorium in Venice, where a Byzantine refugee carefully unrolls a parchment, reading aloud from Plato's Republic in the original tongue. Latin scholars gather close, absorbing both the words and the gravitas of a civilization they barely knew. The Renaissance painters, too, are influenced. The use of gold leaf, the stylized iconography, the domes, all reflect Byzantine artistic sensibilities. Even in Venice itself, traces remain. The Basilica of San Marco, with its glittering mosaics and onion domes, is a mirror of Constantinople's visual grandeur. For centuries, Venice and Byzantium had traded, warred, and entwined. Now, Venice holds relics, both literal and cultural, of its fallen rival. But Byzantium's impact is not only in images and manuscripts, it also lies in ideas. The notion of a unified Christian empire, with a sacral emperor who rules by divine sanction, continues to echo in Western political thought. Charlemagne had once emulated the Byzantines. So too did the Holy Roman emperors of the German lands. Even later, European monarchs adopt titles, rituals, and court ceremonies inspired by Byzantine precedents. In the Church, too, Byzantium's influence lingers. The Eastern Orthodox Church, with its liturgy, chants, and theology, continues unbroken to this day. Stand in a monastery in Mount Athos or a cathedral in Serbia, and the rituals, the incense, the icons, the hymns, still carry the rhythms of Constantinople. Even in modern times, Byzantine studies emerge as a distinct scholarly field. Historians and archaeologists piece together mosaics and manuscripts. Philosophers revisit the debates of the early church. The term Byzantine, once used pejoratively to suggest complexity and intrigue, is slowly reclaimed to reflect sophistication, resilience, and spiritual depth. What, then, is Byzantium's true legacy? It is the bridge between antiquity and the modern world. It is the guardian of Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian theology. It is the preserver of classical texts, and the transmitter of faiths, symbols, and ideas. More than that, it is a memory of continuity. For over 1,000 years, through wars, plagues, and invasions, Byzantium held fast to a vision, a sacred empire, ordered by God, rooted in tradition, yet adaptable to change. As you close your eyes now, let your thoughts drift not to a single moment, but to a mosaic of moments. A monk in a cave near Cappadocia, painting saints in ochre and ash. A procession through Hagia Sophia, lit by candles, echoing with the chants of the divine liturgy. A ship sailing from the Golden Horn, bearing silk, wine, and wisdom. Byzantium was never just a city. It was a rhythm, a continuity, a whisper of Rome wrapped in incense and scripture. And even now, in dreams, it lingers. Let us drift now, beyond wars, beyond emperors, beyond even history itself. Let us wander into the afterglow of Byzantium. The empire has faded from the world, but not from memory. Its shadows stretch softly across time, echoing not in grand battles, but in quiet symbols. And so, before sleep, we reflect. Imagine the lanterns of Constantinople glowing gently along the Mesi, the city's great avenue. Children play near the aqueduct. Merchants roll up their wares. A faint breeze from the Bosphorus carries the smell of honey cakes, incense, and salt. It is evening in the Queen of Cities. The hum of voices blends with church bells. A monk walks by, holding a small wooden icon to his chest. He has copied the same gospel by hand a dozen times, and each time he writes not to reproduce, but to remember. And so, we too remember. Byzantium was never simply a place. It was a way of being in time. It believed in the rhythm of seasons, the repetition of ritual, the sacredness of memory. Unlike the West, which chased the future, Byzantium listened to the past, its fathers, its saints, its scriptures. Its sense of time was cyclical, not linear. To be Byzantine was to inhabit a layered world, earthly and heavenly, imperial and divine, fleeting and eternal. Even the walls of Constantinople carried this double meaning. To outsiders, they were a fortress. But to the faithful, they were a symbol of protection, of boundary, of divine order holding back the chaos. Now, as you lie still, you may find those same walls in your own mind, not as stone ramparts, but as inner borders, between thought and dream, memory and imagination. Let us walk through the empire once more, this time not as historians, but as travelers of the spirit. Breathe in. You stand in a Byzantine monastery perched on a rocky cliff in Cappadocia. The air is thin and cool. You enter a small chamber hollowed into the stone. Candles flicker before a mural of Christ Pantocrator. The ceiling is low. The silence wraps around you like a warm cloak. In this stillness, centuries seem to dissolve. There is no year, no century, only the soft persistence of prayer. Now drift to Thessaloniki, Byzantium's second city. Its harbor sleeps under moonlight. In the hills, olive trees sway in rhythm with ancient hymns. Basilicas stand like quiet sentinels, their mosaics catching what little light remains from the stars. You wander into one of them. Your footsteps echo across the marble. You run your fingers along a column once touched by thousands of hands. Pilgrims, priests, emperors. The gold of the dome glows faintly. It reflects not power, but peace. And still we float. South now, to the dry hills of the Peloponnese, where forgotten Byzantine towns crumble gently in the sun. At Mistras, roses grow wild among broken archways. Once a center of philosophy, art, and learning, it is now quiet, yet not empty. Its spirit lingers, just beyond sound. A child's laugh from the past, a bell that no longer rings, a final sermon before exile. As you breathe, you may sense them, the weight of time pressing not heavily, but gently, like silk. And now we arrive, again, at Constantinople. We step into the Hagia Sophia, not as it was or is, but as it lives in dream. Its dome floats above you like the sky itself. 1,000 oil lamps cast golden halos along its marble walls. The chant of the liturgy moves in circles, never beginning, never ending. Here, emperors were crowned. Here, icons were hidden and unveiled. Here, voices rose in joy, lamentation, wonder. And though the building is no longer what it once was, though centuries have altered its function, its form, it still holds a silence that remembers. The Byzantines believed the world was enchanted. Every event had meaning, Every symbol pointed beyond itself. A loaf of bread was not merely food, it was communion. A crown was not merely power, it was divine favor. And now, as we slip further into rest, perhaps that enchantment can return, not as superstition, but as wonder. The kind of wonder that sees meaning in stillness, in pattern, in the quiet repetitions of life. The Byzantines saw themselves as standing between two worlds. Perhaps we do too. Each night, we cross a border, from wakefulness into sleep, from thought into image, from memory into dream. And what is sleep, if not a little Byzantium of the soul? A sacred in-between, guarded by memory, lit by icons only we can see. So let the empire fall. Let it fade into history. But let its spirit rise like incense into the cool air of eternity. You are not alone. The chants still echo, the lamps still glow, and the story, like the empire, is never truly over. Breathe once more. Let the night carry you gently, and sleep beneath the dome of memory. Byzantium remains.